Good morning, and thank you for joining us again.
Good
So,
morning.
today I'm really, really excited to be joined by the beautiful Michelle Marie Whitehead, who is a creative business lawyer and mentor. Hello, Marie. Hello, Michelle. How are
I'm good. I'm
you?
good. I like to confuse people by putting my middle name in there.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you whether you like to be called by both, and because some people like to be called by both their names. So I meant to ask you that actually before we started, but that's all good.
It's actually part of my journey because when was a normal lawyer,
Yes.
um, I didn't want my clients to be able to find my personal Facebook profile or to
Ah,
track me on Facebook.
yeah.
And so I put my middle name in there as a way of hiding myself in a way.
Yeah.
But now it's sort of yeah, I'm open, I'm integrated. You can find me
Yeah.
anywhere.
Oh, perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And now I know we've had a little bit of a chat previously, and the beautiful listeners that we have really, really, really need what you have. So a lot of our beautiful clients are in that sort of holistic space, the wellness space, and there's a lot of things that I guess we get told from a very predominantly American market at the moment, I guess, for us, and
Yeah.
it's slowly coming into Australia. So I really wanted to have you, on so that you can help clarify some of those things.
Sure.
But before we get into that, I would really love for you to start off by telling us a little bit about your journey and how you decided to become a lawyer.
Sure. So I started out when I was at high school, and actually from my earliest years, I wanted to be a writer, and I was always writing fiction and poetry and bits and pieces. But all of the adults in my life at the time kept telling me, being a writer is a hobby. You need to have a real job to sustain you and keep you going until, if you're going to write, do it as a hobby, do it in the background. And so I'd done some mock trials at school, and I sort of thought, well, law is all about telling stories in its way. So first thing I did was I went to university. I did first class honours in English at University of Sydney, and I thought, right, now I've got my English degree. I'm steeped in literature and poetry. I can write. And I just sort of sat there and I never wrote anything after that. It was really a strange period. So I thought, okay, they were right. I better go and do law. So I went and got first class honours in law. And I did that in the year wrote my honours thesis in the year my first child was born.
Perfect.
And then I continued on, and I thought, law is all about storytelling. It's all, it's connected. It makes sense. And I went on and I graduated into law, and I was going to become a barrister and actually do that sort of storytelling in court role. But there was health problems that sort of got in the way. And so I was left working at a small country firm where I basically did everything that I'd negotiated a position because I had two children by that stage, two toddlers, and I didn't want to be in an office all the time. So I sort of negotiated a position where I could work mostly from home.
Oh, perfect.
And in order to do that, I was being paid very little for the work I was doing, although my clients were being charged a lot.
Yes.
But I was also, I had the freedom to sort of name my own hours, do my own work. But the other lawyers in the firm were into criminal law and family law, both of which I don't like at all.
Yeah.
I don't like practicing in. So it's basically I took everything else. And that meant all of the cases that had lots of documents, that were business law, that were contract law, that were all that sort of stuff. And I was quite good at writing contracts and things. So I sort of basically fell into that position where I was doing all of the business law for the firm.
Yeah.
And that went on for a couple of years. And then after about 6 years of that, I realized that I had had enough of being sort of the last on the feed chain when it came to getting paid and various other things like that. So I thought, I went back to university and I did a master's in law, and I was going to become a mediator. So I got fully accredited as a mediator and a family dispute resolution practitioner. And then again, I sat there and there were no clients because I'm in a small country area. And the clients who rang me about mediation had no money to pay for mediation. And I was fascinated by online dispute resolution. That's what I wrote my thesis about, the potential for online dispute resolution in Australia. So I started exploring the online world of business, and I fell into Facebook and suddenly discovered all these Facebook groups and Facebook entrepreneurs, and it was like I'd found heaven. I was like, yes. These are my people. These are the ones who get my language. This is what allows me to work from home. This is everything I've ever wanted.
Yeah.
And for a while, I kept focusing on the mediation and the risk management stuff I'd done, but it didn't really gel with anybody. It didn't get there. And I started, as I learned more and more about the entrepreneurial mindset and about the holistic way that we practice, I finally got, and I did a lot of mindset work and a lot of shadow work. I finally got to a point where I could forgive myself for becoming a lawyer. And once I'd done that, everything took off. I began seeing how I could reinvent traditional legal constructs that were based in fear and avoidance and shutting things down and keeping people separate. And I could reinvent them and reverse engineer them so that they became tools for love and connection and curiosity and self-care for your business.
Yeah.
And that's where I am now. I'm busy reinventing all those tools. I write contracts that care rather than a barbed wire fence. I believe a contract should be a sacred container that holds space for relationships to flourish and all of that sort of thing. So that's my story.
It's such a beautiful journey, and I think that's what really makes you stand out apart from others, that may be in that space. And I know that's what sort of attracted me to you, because you do come from that beautiful space. And I just have to mention, the listeners won't be able to see, but anyone watching the video can. I love that you have a beautiful fairy wonderland in the background. And that really, for me, sums it up.
Yeah, that was one of the turning points for me. When I started actually appearing on videos and things and making my own videos, I just had an old sarong that I used to hang up behind me. And my husband's a master eBay shopper. Yes. And he went onto eBay and he found me this photography background that was fairyland. It was like, yes! I'm a lawyer who works in fairyland. So me. And that was sort of about the time that I was able to forgive myself for becoming a lawyer and sort of see how this could actually feed my soul as well as supporting other people. So.
Absolutely. I think it's perfect, because very much, when you mention contracts or terms and conditions, it's like, oh my God. So I think being able to come at it from that angle is so great, and it really does, I think, assist in nurturing the clients that are having those moments, and helping them sort of put the right things in place for their business, but in a nice, soft way. Yeah.
I think my mission is all about, we as entrepreneurs, we are so sold on the idea of building our castles in the air, and that is so much what we have to do. We just have to go out and create it out of our imaginations and make it happen. But then we get to a point where it's actually working and we've got this amazingly gorgeous castle, but it doesn't feel stable, it doesn't feel professional, it doesn't feel strong enough to survive. And if we come in at that stage and put solid foundations under it, that's how we can really make that transition into the next stage of growth for our business. Putting those solid foundations under our castles in the air, because castles in the air are beautiful and they deserve to survive and change the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love how you just mentioned it's a very, it's a big part in growth. It's at the start, it's one of those things you just sort of get in there and you do what you need to do. But as you grow, it is one of the things that really needs to have more attention paid to it, so that you can grow, safely and securely as well. Yeah. And I mentioned at the start, one of the big things that I come across with my clients, and something that I sort of came across when I was just starting out in my health coaching business as well, was the different regulations and things that come up. Now, and I know in America, you're not allowed to mention diet or meal plan, or you're not allowed to really say anything.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of that sort of, especially because where I studied to be a health coach was an American institute, and I know a lot of our listeners have the same sort of background. So what is there a big difference sort of between Australian law and American law? And is there anything in particular that we really need to be aware of in our copy or when we're speaking to people in that health sort of frame?
Yeah, sure. So there's a connection here between two things. First, to do with America. America is a highly litigious society. Although we both have the same common law tradition, we're both descended from the English legal tradition. So lots of our laws, like our contract laws and things, are basically very much the same. The way those laws are administered are different. And in America, you're much more likely to have people who are willing and ready to sue you for things. That's less the case in Australia. The other thing is that in Australia, what you need to focus on is the intersection of two bodies of law. So one is the regulation of health service providers, and one is and the other is Australian consumer law. And where those two intersect is where you need to be aware. So first, I obviously can't go into all the specific regulations for different types of healthcare providers, but you need to educate yourself, is really what I'm saying.
Absolutely.
You need to find out what applies in your specific level of practice, to do the research, to search, okay, if you're a masseur or something, massage regulations in Australia. And really and best practice is another search word to use, but use best practice for your industry in Australia and see what comes up and get really curious. What is the requirements for my industry, not just legally, but ethically as well?
Yes.
And one thing that will help you with that is the National Code of Conduct for unregistered health service providers. So if you're a registered health service provider, such as a midwife or a psychologist or a counsellor, or most of those areas that do actually have their own internal regulations, obviously you need to be absolutely on top of what your requirements are for that specific industry. If you're one that is less regulated, that is an unregistered health service provider, Australia has developed a national code, and it's being implemented in all of the various states and territories in different ways. And the way to find it is often to search Health Service Commission in your state, and then National Code of Conduct or something along, or Code of Conduct. And that will bring it up. And that covers all the things like how you treat your clients, your ethical obligations, your things like not consuming drugs or alcohol while you're treating a patient.
Yeah.
It also covers things like not making huge claims about what you cure and things like that. And it's really, really, really well worth reading through the National Code of Conduct, just to get an overview of where you stand with all of that. And that bit about making claims is where it intersects with consumer law, because under Australian consumer law, you have a number of obligations. If you're buying or selling any goods or services in Australia, you are bound by Australian consumer law.
Yeah.
So that contains things like truth in advertising and misrepresentation and deceptive and misleading conduct. So those are the things where you have to be really careful about what you're saying, how you're selling your services. I mean, there's not the specifics of America where you have to have some parts of your contract or your warranty or terms and conditions in capital letters, and you have to have, there's a whole pile of things you're not allowed to say. You're pretty much allowed to say anything unless it's specifically regulated by your industry. Like, for example, lawyers aren't allowed to promise a certain result. but then that makes sense because it's ethically and under Australian consumer law, it would be misleading to promise a set result. So the same applies to healthcare service providers.
Yeah.
So those two things, and I've done webinars on Australian consumer law, and I will do more.
Yeah.
And I've actually had chats with other providers about the National Code of Conduct, and we'll probably do a bit more about that over time. But that's, in a nutshell, really quickly, that is the two areas where you really need to be aware.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, just really being honest and truthful about what you have.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The more open, upfront, authentic, clear, and honest in your communication that you are, the less likely you're going to get into trouble.
Yeah.
Honestly, if you focus on clarity and really providing your clients with absolute understanding of how you work and what you do and what you don't do, and where the boundaries between your responsibility and their responsibility for their own health and safety begin, and if you provide them with that certainty around what they can expect from working with you, and if you are consistent and you treat every client in the same way, and you have a system for making sure that things just sort of roll along, then you should be fine.
Yeah. Oh, beautiful. And that does really roll it on to my next question, which was about product and service agreements. Now, I know there's a few things that I want to ask you, obviously, about different agreements and things that we have in our business, we should have. One of them, the product and service agreement, I think is a really, along with all of them, but it's a really important one along the same lines as what you were saying, because it really outlines what you're doing, what you're offering, what they can expect. And if that's not there, then this is the repercussion kind of thing.
Exactly. So the client agreement not only, and I just call them client agreements at this stage, but they're product and service agreements. That's what they are. And they can be specific for various industries, or they can just be an overall one. They're pretty much all based on the same important areas. And they tell the client who they're working with.
Yeah.
They tell them what to expect from you, how you work. They cover all of your boundaries. They set your boundaries around appointment times and cancellations and withdrawals and payment. They also manage the client's expectations by telling them what they can expect from you, and also what their responsibilities are. So it's mutual obligations. They're very much a mutual document.
Yeah.
They also contain your disclaimers, which is that stuff about the boundaries and what I do and what I don't do. They cover intellectual property, which is an important one. They cover your methods of communication and manage that whole relationship. They cover your liability. So really putting who is responsible for what and when and where and to what amount. They cover jurisdiction, so that if something goes wrong, you don't want to be, if you're working with clients overseas, you want them to be under Australian jurisdiction. So if everything went really, really bad and you did end up in court, it's an Australian court close to you.
That's a good point.
Not one overseas. Yeah. And they cover your dispute resolution. So they set in place a whole structure of processes, from negotiation to mediation, that make litigation a last resort. Yeah. So that you don't end up in court, because you've got this whole process here to work through first, which basically should solve problems. Like, I see the role of my contracts as being to solve problems before they begin.
Yeah.
So we try and brainstorm everything that could possibly go wrong, everything that possibly worries you, everything that your clients need to know. And we put that all in the contract, so it's all there, available for people from the start.
Yeah.
Now, as a consumer of health service providers, of health services, I can say that it is just as important for your clients as it is for you, people think about clients, they think about the traditional contracts, and they're all for the protection of one side. Whereas I believe that the contract is just as important and just as desired by your clients, because it really does give them that understanding of what to expect.
Yeah.
And that it takes away a lot of anxiety and a lot of uncertainty and a lot of worry about, you know, what's the limits, what's the scope of what we're doing, what do I, you know, what am I paying for? How do I need to pay? If I've got a problem, what do I do about that? So it manages all of that client relationship for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very ingrained in me from my bank days. But anytime if I have a client come to me now and they're like, oh my God, Teresa, I've got this client, or I've just started working with this person, I don't know what's happening, I haven't heard from them, I always say, what's it say in the contract?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't have one. Oh,
yeah.
It's really important to have one, because it's like you say, it's a sort of, it's the place you go to solve the problem, to hopefully solve the problem, and that should be it. It's there in writing. Okay, well that's what, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I mean, a lot of traditional contracts, you sign it because you want to work with the person, and then you stick it in the filing cabinet, and nobody thinks about it again until something goes wrong, and then they pull it out. Oh, can I go to court with this, or whatever else? Whereas I see contracts as a living document that come from the heart of your business.
Yeah.
And I expect people to be referring to them all the time. Okay, what do I expect? What's actually being provided? What's, you know, really set out the details of every aspect of the relationship.
Yeah.
So that it can be that real living communication, so that you're not answering the same questions over and over again. When problems happen, you're not reacting and from a place of panic and fight or flight and making things up as you go along. You've got it all set out for you. It's all laid out there. Yeah. And you've thought about it at a time when you're calm and clear about what you want, and you've set it all down there, so that when problems do arise, you can just refer to what did I want to do? How did I want this to work? What are my intentions for this relationship? And the client's also got exactly the same document, so you're clear on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing, I guess, something that's been brought to my attention recently, which I didn't know about, but the terms and conditions, I guess, and the privacy policy now that we are supposed to have on our websites. And the other thing is, so websites as well, but also someone mentioned recently that Facebook groups should have one as well. So it's what should we sort of be looking at with those kind of things?
Okay, so it's basically, the way I describe it for website terms and conditions and Facebook groups is, you wouldn't invite a couple of thousand people to your home and let them have a party, invite them to a party at your home without putting down some house rules, would you?
Yeah.
So this is where you set your boundaries and your house rules. How do what are you offering on your website? And websites are in a way, website terms and conditions are in a way a mini contract.
Yeah.
So you're offering this website and the information on your website to your people, and by visiting, they are accepting your offer. So a contract at its basic is an offer and an acceptance.
Yeah.
So by visiting, they accept your offer to provide them with information, but you've got to put some terms and conditions, some boundaries around that offer, so that they know what they can expect.
Yeah.
So for health service providers, the important things to have in your terms and conditions are things like your disclaimer, which again says, use this information. I provide this information just as information. It's generic. It's not specifically tailored to your situation. Use it at your own risk, basically. Do your own research. If you're going to act on my advice, do so. Don't hand your power and your responsibility over to me. Stand in your own power and responsibility. Make your own choices and do it in a wise and educated manner. Your website policy, your website terms and conditions also contain your refund policy, so that people know, that's an Australian consumer law obligation, that you have your refund policy publicly available.
Yeah.
they contain your intellectual property protection so that people can't just take stuff off your website and use it in their own businesses. Yeah, all those sorts of things. So really managing the relationship. And again, if you have a membership site or if you have a Facebook group, then it's that rules of engagement stuff as well. It's don't post anything you don't own so that you're not inadvertently breaching other people's intellectual property rights. It's talk nice, play nicely with each other. You know, it's, yes, I am a health service professional or a legal professional, but we are here for open discussion, you know. Don't rely on my advice or information I'm providing without making your own decisions. Check with your doctor or medical professional or health service provider, you know, if you have any concerns, or ask, or all of that sort of stuff. So
yeah. I think that's a huge one too, is check with your doctor.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about managing the relationship. And you mentioned privacy policies there. The definition of health service provider in the Privacy Act is very, very broad.
Yeah.
It basically covers anyone who provides services that impact on somebody's health or well-being, which includes mental well-being. So it could even extend to counsellors, and coaches. If you're a life coach, then it's quite possible that you're crossing that line. And in any case, a privacy policy is a really good idea, because people are trusting you with their personal information, with their sensitive information. So sensitive information is things like information about their bodily functions, their health, their families, their birth dates, all of that sort of stuff, the stuff that identifies them at a really personal level. And then personal information is things like their email address, what they do for work, all of that sort of stuff. So people are trusting you with this information. And as a way of both honouring that trust and also ethically fulfilling your obligations, it makes sense to tell them, this is why I collect your information. This is how I store it. This is how you can get access to find out what I'm storing about you and change it if you need to. You know, this is the circumstances under which I will tell anyone else what your information is. So that's what a privacy policy is.
Oh my God, so important. Really, really important. And I know I mentioned to you last time we spoke that I DIY some of mine, and I only feel comfortable doing that because I did spend a long time looking at contracts. But I do still know that there is, especially after speaking today, that it may need to be looked at. But for those out there who maybe are just starting out, don't quite have the money to invest just yet, even though it is a very important investment, and maybe are trying to DIY a little bit, is there anything in particular that maybe they should just really check, or, you know, anything that they could possibly do if that is the route that they're going to go down?
Sure. I absolutely love DIY. And the way I create all of my contracts these days is I start by giving everybody the DIY pack. And the DIY pack, I create these, they're actually worksheets, and I create them by going out and I research hundreds of examples. You know, I just do a Google search and I pull in, okay, all of the types of this type of contract. So for example, the one I'm writing this week is a web designer agreement. And I pull in as many different templates and precedents as I can. And I also have access to legal precedents and such, so I get them too. And then I look at what's actually in these agreements. What are they covering? And I reduce those to questions so that you can go through and answer the questions in this worksheet in your own words, and you're pulling out all of the information from your brain that you need to put into your contract, that it's all in your own words. And then with my DIY packs, there's a blank document or a blank draft which has got headings and some of the legal formulaic bits already written for you. And you just sort of put your answers in there and write them up as something that you can really feel comfortable with. And that's how I create my documents. And then on top of that, you've got the DIY plus review, which is where you purchase my services to just go over what you've drafted with a fine-tooth comb and make sure it's all good. Or done for you, where you can just hand me your worksheet and I'll write the whole thing for you. But if you're not going to sort of take a pack like that, which I've created, you can do the same thing by going out. Don't just take one, take at least 5 or 10, read them through, work out what it is they contain. Sure, cut and paste the bits in, but then try and translate them into your own language as clearly as possible. And if you don't, and every word for word, say, okay, what does each word in this thing mean? And I can tell you, trying to do that with traditionally written contracts is a pain in the backside.
Yeah.
So that's why you sort of might step up to the questionnaire worksheet style one, because it's all sort of laid out for you. But yeah, don't put anything in your contract that you don't understand the meaning and function of that word.
Yeah.
Have a lawyer review it if you can.
Yeah.
And just be really, really careful about things. Like, I've seen people copy in jurisdictional clauses like we talked about before, and they haven't changed the location. So it'll still be sort of saying, any disputes under this contract will be handled under the law of Oregon.
Yeah.
Or something like that. And you need to actually, the big problem with doing it that way is it doesn't feel like it's your own.
Yeah.
And it's not going to give you that sense of security and safety. So put the time and effort into reverse engineering it until it feels like yours.
Yeah.
Is pretty much the best thing.
I think that's such a great tip. And do you know what? I think as well as myself and a lot of the listeners probably would have thought to do something like this, it is basically just to get you to do it yourself, like for you to do it. But I know for me, I do like to be a bit more hands-on in things. And so I love that you have that DIY, sort of templates and packs available for people who do want to maybe work through it themselves and know what's going on. I think that's amazing.
My most expensive DIY packs are $275. So I try and keep them really low, the DIY packs, and then the services get added on top of that if you want the services. But absolutely, those DIY packs are priced at a DIY level, because I love DIY.
Well, exactly. And a lot of us, especially, when we are starting out, it is tricky to, know where we can invest our money. And I think that is a bloody good investment, and it's at a price point that most of us can afford. So I think that's amazing. So I'm so glad to know that you do those. So I won't give you any more questions, hound you anymore. I think you've given us so much amazing information today. And as I said, there's a lot of things that I know I need to go and triple check on my own. But I would really love for you to let us know how our listeners can connect with you and, start sort of reaching out to you for their needs.
Sure. So my website's currently under construction and should be up by the end of June, fingers crossed.
Awesome.
And that will have all of my DIY packs on there, so people can just sort of browse and purchase them straight away. But at the moment, my Facebook business profile is Michelle Whitehead AU, or M Whitehead AU, I think. Yeah. But if you search Michelle Whitehead and just look for the one that's in Australia, you probably find me. And I also have my Business Serenity Facebook group, which is it's a very small group still, and there's not a lot of engagement, but I post there daily, and I'm constantly posting tips and ideas about contracts, boundaries, intellectual property, and risk management, as well as some high vibe stuff and some business wisdom type areas. And there's also an ask away hashtag, which you can use to ask a question any day. And
perfect. Awesome. And I'll put the links in as well so that people
can connect
with you that way.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. You really
You're welcome.
Given us so much amazing information.
It's been lovely chatting with you.
Thank you. And I do highly recommend for anyone listening, if you are not quite sure what you're doing, be sure to make sure that you have that safety and security out there for yourself and your product and your beautiful brand that you've spent so much time creating. So definitely invest in yourself, however that might look to you, and make sure that you're covered in whatever way. Awesome. Thank you so much. And we
You're very
will
welcome.
hopefully connect with you again soon.
I hope so.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, bye.